Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of the HawksZone Rundown. You got me and Mookie Alexander tonight breaking down the Seahawks 33-16 win over the Kansas City Chiefs. Mookie, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Bryce. A little bit tired because, man, those 7 o'clock kicks when you're having to do so much stuff after the game. And we got to do this again for the Houston Monday Night Football game, but at least that's going to be different because it's the regular season. But should we just start planning the parade now? I mean, I'm just looking out the map of Seattle and figuring out where's the best place, because you can't just do the same route twice. But yeah, in all seriousness, it might be preseason, but man, it's good to watch some smash mouth football. And you know what? The Seahawks have been talking about we're going to run the ball more and run the ball better. And even before Mike McDonald, and it just hasn't clicked. But this time, again, it's just preseason. But it feels like we're seeing the vision now and that the promises may become reality.
Yeah, no, it's definitely refreshing to see a run game in Seattle where they can come out and have a 10-play drive and 8 of those plays be runs and 8 of those plays move you down the field before you get to your final pass play to put the ball in the end zone at one point. But me and Mookie are going to sit here, guys. We're going to break it down all with you. Please get your viewer comments and questions in. We're going to do a 12s takeaway segment towards the end, where that's where we want to get your guys' input on what were some of the biggest takeaways you guys found from last night's game. Outside of that, remember, everyone, subscribe, like, click the notification button, all those good things. Help the show, help the algorithm of the show. You can also find us over with Mookie on Field Goals. But with that being said, let's get into it.
So y'all can sit here and ask me all the questions y'all want to.
Don't you ever talk about me.
Yeah, let's go. It's go time, baby.
Here comes Gino. Steps up, takes that shot to the end zone. It is Metcalf. 20.
I'm just about that action, boss.
You about to go get it. You just like to do it.
That's what it is.
Off me.
Nobody in the world can do it.
Are you kidding me? Trying to do that. Pass is caught back in. Jaxon Smith-Njigba. The circus music moves in. Throws for Baldwin. Oh my goodness, he caught it. By the
This is the HawksZone Rundown with your hosts, Ryan and Bryce.
Well, guys, let's get into this discussion today, and we'll start kind of somewhere for something that we got to see for the first time as Seahawks fans, and that was Sam Darnold and this starting offense. Cooper Kupp was on the field. JSN was on the field. Ken Walker, unfortunately, was still not on the field, but Zach Charbonnet was on the field. And basically the entire starting O-line as it looks right now without Charles Cross due to his finger injury. And, man, that opening drive, that was soothing to the soul, Mookie, for me. Like, I sat there, and it was like the smoothest and soothing thing I could have ever seen was us just opening play, Zach Charbonnet right down the throat of that Kansas City defense for a first down run. And we were off to the races at that point, and Sam went 4 for 4. So what did you make of Sam Darnold's kind of initial opening drive as starting quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks?
Well, he looked in command of the offense. Like he knew what to do. The depth of target on those throws, I mean, he threw 2 passes behind the line of scrimmage, another one that was like 2 yards, and I think the pass to Barner might have been his furthest beyond the line of scrimmage, but I'm totally fine with that. I mean, it's just short passes, get the ball out. The one to JSN, I feel like that wasn't a first read play and that he wanted something a little further down the field, maybe to Kupp, but then you have JSN with a little motion out in the back, just swing it out to him. You get some easy yards. It's some easy throws. And we know that they're going to be more difficult throws, and some of the flashier plays are going to come in the regular season, so I'm not worried about that. I just like the way, just aesthetically, that the offense looked. And as you mentioned, the drive started with Charbonnet running it down Kansas City's throats and then ending with Charbonnet untouched. I mean, think about that. How often have you seen over the last few years a Seahawks running back go completely untouched into the end zone from that far out? That was super impressive. As expected, a lot of under center stuff. You mix your play action in there. A lot of 12 personnel. They were running quite a bit of 13 personnel even later on in the game, and not even in the red zone. They were running it in their own territory. So you see the vision of Clint Kubiak and Mike McDonald coming together. No, they're not going to be doing it to this extreme in the regular season because no team does that anymore. But it's things to work on, and they're working on it pretty well up and down the roster, all the way from the first team all the way down to the third team. But I think that the star of the first series was less Darnold and more the offensive line. particularly Gray Zabel and Anthony Bradford. Like the guards were really good, and Jalen Sundell actually. So I'm going to go with the interior of the O-line because they're the big story. They are the guys who more or less make or break the 2025 Seahawks offense. If that trio doesn't end up performing particularly well, the Seahawks offense is not going to look that crisp throughout the regular season. But Zabel through 2 weeks looks very much like the guy that the Seahawks expected him to be in the first round. Sundell, and we'll talk about it a little later, the center job has become a lot more interesting because it looked like it was Olu's all the way. But with him not practicing and being out with this back issue, like Sundell, again, he looks like an NFL level center. And then Anthony Bradford, as much as he's been dogged by fans, including us, the running game, the holes he was opening up, whether for Charbonnet or for Damien Martinez, he looked very good. So yeah, the offensive line in pass pro and against the run, they were sharp. And I tell you what, after years of being a little iffy as far as backup tackle depth, Josh Jones, either at left tackle or right tackle, I feel a lot more comfortable with him as an emergency situation over Stone Forsythe and some of the other backups over the years, Jake Curhan. So you name them, they haven't gone over particularly well. With Josh Jones, I feel like if he has to play any snaps in the regular season, the Seahawks do not need to completely change their offense to protect their tackles.
Yeah, that's something that's huge. And I agree with you, Mookie, in the sense of, I don't know if it was so much about what Sam did. The thing I'll say about Sam, though, and you could see it, is his comfortableness in this offense. Like that first throw he had, they come back, they drop back. He goes 1, 2, 3, bang. I know where my check down is to Barner. He hits Barner. Barner gets the first down, or I think they might have been inches from getting the first down, one of the two.
Yeah, they were
and then short. Yeah, they were yards short. And then you go and you see him kind of operate this offense, and they've got the boot. And that was the thing that I like to see too, is Sam on the move, making throws in the flat to Robbie Oots. And then you've got that really cool design, which, again, this is what I think stood out to me a bunch, and we'll get to it later on when we talk about Clint Kubiak, is the play to JSN. And just these variations on small things that look the same to a defense, but there's small little wrinkles here that now change who the primary objective of getting the ball is to. It felt more like a, synchronized movement of an offense than what I would say last year was, which was basically like a Rolodex. It was like, I like this play, so we're going to call it. It had no bearing of being something close to what you had ran earlier in the game. It was just like, oh, I like this, we're going to go with this. And I agree with you. That interior of that offensive line last night was spectacular. Watching Gray Zabel, watching Jalen Sundell, watching Anthony Bradford, and not just, the run blocking of Bradford, but the pass blocking and him finding work and sealing a gap on one of the throws where he seals the interior of the gap until Sundell can get over. Sundell gets over. Now he's kicking out to help Abe Lucas push the D end around and make a clean pocket. Like those were things we haven't seen in the past. So overall, though, I was impressed watching Sam play and just his decisiveness in it. And I think that's all we're going to see of him. I doubt we'll see him at all in Green Bay because they're going to do the joint practices. So the taste of going 4 for 4 down the field in an opening scoring drive, I know it's something we saw similarly last year. However, I'll say this year's felt different than last year's with Grubb, because everything with Grubb's last year was in shotgun, but we have seen it through all the quarterbacks, through both games. A similar offensive philosophy has been established by Clint Kubiak and the way he calls plays. So there's one other guy that had a pretty big night last night, and I think a lot of people will be happy with this, and it was like Bobo's breakout night last night. 2 touchdowns. He was making catches throughout the game, blocking his butt off in the run game. Mookie, what did you make of the usage of Bobo on a slot screen, or a tear screen as they call them? And then again, I think Bobo, Mookie, might be the best fade ball receiver we have, because every time they seem to throw him a fade ball near the red zone, he comes down with it somehow.
Yeah, any talk about Bobo's fighting for a roster spot, we can put that to bed. It's over with. Like he's on the team. There's no reason to think otherwise, because he's got value as a blocker. He's got value as a receiver. Like he is a low volume but high efficiency target. Like if you're giving Jake Bobo 80 targets in a season, it's probably not going to go very well. But if it's like, half that, especially in this kind of offense, he is going to make the most of his opportunities. If he can be like, I don't want to say poor man's Joe Jaravicious, because I think Jaravicious was also a very good receiver who did some other things that Bobo didn't really do. But if he can be like, I don't know, a Jawan Jennings type in a way, I'm totally fine with that. And the screen was one thing because I know Seattle ran that. It might not have been a slot screen. They ran that play against Dallas or screened him against Dallas a couple years back, and he fell just a yard short of the first down. And then the next snap, Charbonnet gets blown up in the backfield by current Seahawk DeMarcus Lawrence. But watching Jake Bobo make people miss in the open field, oof, that was already great. But the fade to the end zone, first of all, excellent throw by Drew Lock. But the second bit was that is exemplary. That's a perfect example, rather, of Bobo's value to the team as a pass catcher. He can win above the rim, as they say. He is somebody who can high point effectively. As we've seen, he can make circus catches, and his body control is also excellent. We remember the touchdowns he had against Arizona in his rookie season, then against Carolina, where he's having to make not just great catches, but also get both feet down. This one, the feet weren't as much of the issue as it was the catching. But when you think about the Seahawks receiving group, as good as JSN is and as good as Cooper Kupp has been, when you think about options to just go up and get it, moss somebody, or just win at the high point, I think Bobo is right up there at the top. So he might not be this do-it-all receiver, but he has a role in this offense, a very defined role. And I'm excited to see what Kubiak's going to do with him. So it was a big night for him. And he even returned punts, or at least he returned one punt. Part of it was Horton, I guess, had a minor ankle thing, so he's fine. So we don't have to worry about that. But we saw Jake Bobo fielding punts at the practice and at the scrimmage a couple weeks back. So no, we're not going to see Jake Bobo punt return at one anytime soon. But I feel like the reason that he'd be there is kind of like Brian Walters years back. He's a safe pair of hands. He's not going to muff the ball. He's not going to fumble it. So his value on special teams, his value as a run blocker, his value as a red zone target, all of that was there to see. So yeah, more Bobo, everybody, more Bobo.
I don't think he can be any more efficient than Jake Bobo was. He had 2 targets, 2 catches, 24 yards, and 2 touchdowns. It's a pretty effective preseason outing for a guy to a point that a lot of people thought was going to be on the bubble. And to me, there were points where I looked at it and I went, maybe. But then when I looked at what his skill set was, I went, that kind of fits in this offense. And so, you know what? I think it's a pretty safe lock to say that Jake Bobo's in the top 4 of this receiving core in a lot of ways, I think. But Mookie, let's move on one more spot here to another group on the offense, the offense. And that was the O-line. We talked about it there a little bit. And the running backs. All the running backs looked good last night. Damien Martinez, George Holani, Charbonnet got to play, and we saw what he did on that opening drive. And even Jacardia Wright, that one he had where he looked like he got tackled and then spun and went up the sideline. That's a guy you got to find a way to sneak through that practice squad, because it looks like Seattle's got a plethora of running backs behind Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet that are all capable of toting the rock. And it was really good to see Damien Martinez have kind of a bounce back game. You saw a little bit more of that physicality he runs with, I think, than what we saw in that first game.
Yeah, the running backs were very good. I mean, Charbonnet's explosiveness looks so much different than now. Some of it might be, hey, he actually has holes to run through. But just even watching his rookie season versus now, and Charbonnet is just not hesitating, hitting the hole with confidence, and his acceleration is looking quite good. He wasn't like a slow poke coming out of college, but he looks to me as fast and as lean as he's ever been, so that's great. Holani, he's got a lot of angry runs in him. And first carry of the game for him, he goes for 30 yards. And he started the game with a huge kick return. Unfortunately, Drake Thomas got a holding penalty or whatever. But I think that Holani is going to be on this roster because he has that versatility as not just a running back, but also I think they trust him more in pass protection right now than Damien Martinez. So I don't want to pour water on Martinez's very good game last night, but it feels like if you looked at the films of both guys, when it's a passing situation, they prefer Holani to be there as like chipping or at least being in pass pro, picking up an extra rusher over Martinez, but that's fine. Holani's got an extra year of experience on him. But Holani also being a kick returner, I think also matters much because I tell you what, Steven Sims, I think has been in the league long enough that he can just get cut and immediately put on the practice squad. He wouldn't be subject to waivers. And even still, like Steven Sims is not going to do anything in this offense, not with the receivers ahead of him. So he is not unbelievably important that you're going to be terrified he's going to get claimed off of waivers. Whereas Holani, I think that he is determined to not lose a running back 3 competition this year, and he is poised to be that third down back.
I agree with you. To me, the difference of George Holani last year and what we saw, which was still very good, to the George Holani we're seeing this year, almost as night and day. Like his pass pro, his running with authority, catching out of the backfield, his speed even to a point. Like some of those runs he's had in this preseason, I don't think we saw that last year. And again, it's that year 1 to year 2 transition for most of these guys, getting in a NFL weight room program, all the training that they do sometimes allows these guys to take a jump. And I think George Holani has made that jump. The rest of the running back room, Damien Martinez, it's going to be really interesting coming down to cut down time because the rough preseason opener, now how does he finish it out is going to make it really hard for Seattle, I think, to determine if they can sneak him and Jacardia right through to the practice squad if they needed to, because there's a chance Seattle may want to keep 6 receivers. Like we keep talking about MVS as is MVS going to make this team. I think it's pretty safe to say that MVS, considering how quickly he's getting brought out of games for a guy that's supposedly on the bubble, I don't think he's really on the bubble. I think it's we're not necessarily going to, do things. And with Torrey Horton maybe being a little nicked up, maybe we see a little bit of MVS and he's more that, security blanket in case something goes wrong with Horton injury-wise. The thing for me that was so encouraging was the second offensive line unit. So when we saw Mason Richmond and Christian Haynes and, Federico go in there at center, and we saw Josh Jones play a little bit there, and we saw Kite play there, and my guy, Bryce Coutts, they still were moving people. Like, it wasn't like we saw this massive step back when all of a sudden Sundell came out of the game and Abe came out of the game and Bradford came out of the game. No, we still saw them move the line and reestablish that line of scrimmage. And we saw Bryce Coutts get nicked up and then come right back in. And I'll be honest, the one thing I'll say here is I think Satawa Lamea is in trouble of making this roster, because I think Bryce Coutts has stepped up to the point where when he caught back on the sideline, they immediately put him back in the game and he immediately performed. He had that nice pull and kick out block on, I think it was Damien Martinez's short touchdown run.
Yeah, that was the play I was just about to reference, where they just go classic power run, right side, and you've got Coutts pulling, and Martinez has got enough of a hole to sneak in. But yeah, Lomea and the other Seahawks beat writers, Bob Condotta, Brady Henderson, they were bringing it up too, that Lomea went from working with the 2s when Haynes had his pec thing to now he's playing into the fourth quarter with the 3s and at left guard. And I'm just wondering if he's going to make this roster. I mean, he could still be on the practice squad or whatever. And if not, then, that's life. He'll find a spot somewhere else in the NFL. But keep in mind that he was not John Benton's pick. Like, he had no involvement in the scouting, not him, not Rick Dennison, nobody else on the staff. They had nothing to do with drafting Lomea. Lomea was, to me, one of the better run blockers for Seattle when he did play last season. But in terms of his pass pro, oh boy, he needs some help there. And even last night, he had 2 penalties, and there was 1 rep, if you remember, the throw over the middle from Drew to Derek Young for 24 yards or whatever it was. Lomea gets beat like a drum by Jerry Tillery, who's been in the league for 8 years, but he's pretty widely considered a draft bust. So I feel like Lomea is just too much of a liability in pass pro to justify keeping on the roster. Like, okay, cool, he might be a plus run blocker, but I don't want my backups to be completely unplayable if they're going to have to pass protect at some point. So I think that Coutts might sneak in over Lomea. Richmond, I'm still trying to figure out if they might just stash him on the practice squad, because, again, when you're talking about cutting from 90 to 53, that's 37 players teams have got to cut. And you multiply 37 by 32, and you're looking at, close to about 1,200 players getting churned. And the number of players who get claimed on waiver wire day the next day, not even 1%. So maybe at best you could get something a little hovering in the 1% to 2% range. So I'm not super worried about, this guy might not, this guy's is going to get claimed, this guy's going to get claimed. Most of the time, like 90% of these players who get waived, unclaimed, off to the practice squad they go. So yeah, the offensive line, first team, second team, even the third team, they were all quite good. I've already sung the praises of Josh Jones. Cable do look good, especially after coming back from his elbow thing. I think he got swiped down on his left arm because he didn't go to the ground after that play. So it was just maybe just a little nick, but he's fine. Jarrell also kind of still in the mix, going to right tackle now after being at left tackle. So I think that Jarrell might be safer than Lomea because of the tackle depth. So like, okay, let's say Cross gets hurt and then Josh Jones gets hurt. Who's the next tackle up? And Jarrell would logically be the guy who can play either position. Whereas Lomea, he's either a right guard or left guard, and they drafted 2 guards. And in Richmond's case, he can be guard tackle. And in Cable Dew's case, he could be guard or even center because he was getting some center snaps. And so was Richmond. Not in the game necessarily, but even in practice. So, this is an offensive line with a lot of young talent. I'm not saying this is going to be a good offensive line. Don't want to just, be in celebration mode knowing that the Chiefs were playing backups just as much as the Seahawks were. But the thing that you want to see is you want to see your backups look way better than the other team's backups. And that's what we saw last night, not just in run blocking, but in pass pro, but especially the run blocking, and the coordination between the line and the tight ends too. Like everything just looks so smooth out there. And I think Mike McDonald kind of alluded to it. And in fact, I should pull up the quote, but I don't have it with me right away. But he's kind of like talking about the offensive line and no wiggle room for, it's kind of this, kind of that. No, it's like, no, this is how it's done. This is the footwork. This is what we do. It's almost like a rigidness to it. Like if it's not this, then it's wrong and the whole thing gets messed up. So all the talk throughout the offseason regarding the coaching staff and their attention to detail, it's seemingly passed along to the players.
Yeah, and I got to give credit where it's due. And this offensive line staff, Rick Dennison, Justin Outen, John Benton, you can see the level of expertise now really start to come through with the way these guys are being coached and the impact it's having on the field. And to your point, like for me right now, I'd say the 2 guys that I think are on the shakiest ground for the O-line are probably Lomea and Jarrell, because Mason Richmond, they're trying at center as being the emergency center. The way Mike McDonald has talked about Richmond, and again, he is a John Benton and off this new offensive staff's choice, along with Cable Lou and Gray Zabel, I think there's a chance he might be that potential emergency tackle, to your point, Mookie. And Jarrell's really in a competition. And it'll be interesting to see how it works in this Green Bay game coming up, what these groupings look like, because I don't think we'll see any of the starters at all. I don't think we'll see an Anthony Bradford. I don't think we may have to see Jalen Sundell due to Olu's injury. But that's one other thing before we move off this topic I wanted to kind of get to talk to you about, Mookie, is this center, like the right guard competition is over. It is Anthony Bradford's spot. I think that's very well known now that it is his spot, and Christian Haynes is kind of just going to potentially be a backup for right now. The center competition, though, seems to have completely flip-flopped from where it was probably about, I'd say, 2 weeks ago, going into that initial Vegas Raiders matchup where, yourself, me, Brandon Kane, Dan Vians, we were all down there, and he's like, I think it's Olu's job. Like, I really do think Olu's got the job. It's all kind of basically sewn up. And then Olu ends up getting nicked up and hurt, either whether I don't know if it was in the Fan Fest or if it was in the practices or whatnot when it occurred before that Vegas game. And Jalen Sundell has basically seized that opportunity and said, whoa, hold on here. I'm still a part of this competition. And he has played fantastic these last 2 games.
Yeah, this is going to be fascinating to see whether it's still Olu's job or if Sundell has just taken it away through no fault of Olu's. And I think he got injured on the practice after this Lumen Field scrimmage because we were there and Olu got more of the snaps than Sundell, but it was a lot more even than the day before, where Olu was clearly getting the bulk of the snaps. So with Sundell, really my only worry is if he's going to get overpowered by bigger, better defensive tackles in the regular season. Because he's not the biggest center in the world, but he's not Joey Hunt either. So I think that Sundell, the way that he moves, I think is a little bit more fluid than Oluwatimi when he gets to the second level. And he was blocking extremely well. I think better than he did against the Raiders. So they don't have a bad option here. If it's Oluwatimi, I think Oluwatimi has played 13 games as a starting center, and I don't think he's been like a game damaging liability. And then Sundell hasn't played a full game as a center, but kind of the seeds were planted as far as Sundell possibly being a starting center when he had to fill in for Olu last year in the Green Bay game. Because remember, there was that Charbonnet touchdown run, their only touchdown of the night, and Sundell was one of the key players blocking for Zach on that score. So I think that it's still Oluwatimi if /when he comes back, but if this persists into next week, it might be a little bit too hard to deny Sundell this starting center job. So like, I'm not bothered either way, but if it's Sundell, like, hats off to him. And then suddenly 40% of your starting offensive line consists of North Dakota State Bison.
Yeah, it does. And Zabel and him, you can see the familiarity and some of the abilities that they're able to use and do when it comes to running this outside zone scheme. Like, there was, I believe it was on Holani's big run, you see the reach block capability of Jalen Sundell and the athletic size where he's able to get across the defensive tackle's face and get him hooked to allow Alani to hit that hole and take out the sideline there for about 30 yards. But let's do this. Let's have a quick look at something here, Mookie. And this is something, that I know a lot of people have their feelings about PFF. But let's take a look at the top graded Seahawks through the first 2 weeks of the preseason. So this is the top 10 guys, any position graded out. And this is what it looks like for the Seahawks right now. And the crazy thing about this right now is number one is Abe Lucas. He's an overall at an 89.7, pass block 78.1, run block 90, which again is pretty ridiculous and crazy in itself, right? He's currently ranked as the overall 5th tackle in the NFL with his PFF score. Overall tackle of 2. He's overall the 5th best lineman in the NFL currently, PFF after 2 weeks. Then you look and it's Gray Zabel. So your first round pick is panning out, 86.2. You see his run block, his pass block grades there. Gray Zabel is currently ranked as the 7th best lineman on PFF's grade for the NFL right now. And then let's talk about Robbie Oots. Everyone loves Robbie Oots. He's got an 86 grade. Then we get down to number 4 in this list, and that's Anthony Bradford. And I don't think any of us could realistically have thought Anthony Bradford would be the 4th highest graded Seahawks player currently on PFF's grade scale. He's got an 81. He's got a pass block of a 58.3. He's got a run block of 79.6. But however, what I'll say is in this last game, Anthony Bradford's pass blocking grade was a 77.1. So it got better against actually a better defensive front, in my opinion, in Kansas City. Then you look, it's George Holani, Tyreek Young. Then there's Jalen Sundell at number 7, Mike Jarrell at number 8, Torrey Horton and JSN to finish out. The thing for me is Jalen Sundell currently is ranked as the 7th best center in the NFL after 2 weeks. Mike Jarrell is the 18th best offensive tackle. So, Mookie, when you look at those grades, what kind of sticks out to you that's kind of interesting now?
Well, context is key because we know Jarrell is mostly in there with the 3rd team, whereas Torrey Horton has gotten some 1st and 2nd team run. I think the eye test certainly matches Torrey Horton and what he's been able to do as a receiver. Abe Lucas, he's Abe Lucas. When he's healthy, he is really good. And we didn't even mention him in the first segment, but yeah, Lucas looks as good as he's ever looked, both physically and then in terms of his on-field performance. Zabel has been very comfortable out there, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how he performs in the regular season, but so far so good for Gray. Robbie Oots is going to be a fan favorite no time. I mean, the fact that he's already getting some chance. We need the Oots chance. We need some sort of like button for the PA announcer to press whenever he's got the ball. And we haven't even seen him get a carry yet. We've seen him as a receiver, which makes sense because he was a tight end in college at Alabama. So with Bradford, yeah, his run blocking has been solid and more than solid, in fact. And keep in mind, when Darnold went out, Locke had a series with the 1st team offensive line too. So they kept the starters on the offensive line, or the healthy starters on the offensive line for 2 series, and he ended up with 2 touchdowns, heavily based on the success of the running game. In fact, Drew Lock threw the ball once on what was a 10-play drive. And in fact, he dropped back 2 times. One was one he had to scramble, and another one was an actual throw. So, yeah, I think that's PFF's grades are always good for debate or complaints, but in terms of the top performers, I think the eye test suggests that most of them there, generally match what we've seen in terms of the top Seahawks preseason performers. I don't pay too much attention to league-wide because you don't know who's playing their starters more often or playing their starters at all. But it is still good to see that this offensive line through 2 weeks is looking more cohesive, more connected. Somebody in the comments, it might have been Misfit74, noting the lack of penalties with the first team offense. And that's significant because we know Anthony Bradford has had his issues with penalties, but we're not seeing constant false starts. Holding penalties are going to happen eventually. Like, be on the lookout for that. All these penalties are going to come. But this was one of the most penalized offenses in the league last year, and the offensive line was a major reason for it. So just seeing that this line looks better coached is, to me, the most important thing, the most important takeaway through the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I can't disagree with anything that you said there. And the thing is, too, is remember with those grades, everyone, they're cumulative. So Anthony Bradford in this last game actually graded out as the highest Seahawk grade at a overall of a 92.9. He had a 77 pass block grade, and he had a 90.2 run block grade. And then when you flip, the second guy is Jalen Sundell. He had a 92.4 overall grade with a 79.4 pass block grade and a 91.1 run block grade. So when those two who are on your starting interior are putting out those numbers, that is a positive sign with this offense. And then within that top 10 of guys, Abe Lucas was 5, Gray Zabel was 6. So 4 out of your 5 starting offensive linemen from this game graded out as the top 10 for this past game on PFF. And again, everyone take PFF with a grain of salt. As me and Mookie have learned through the years, it can be kind of the weirdest grading scale you will see, and I'm sure everyone else has seen that. But Mookie, let's move on to the last topic in revolving this offense. Clint Kubiak and his, I would call it, last night was really truly a play calling clinic, in my opinion. Like, even the game before against the Raiders, there is just such a difference having an established NFL offensive staff, and especially play caller, just calling your plays and getting your team in the right position. Like, it doesn't feel like to me there's going to be a point really where Clint Kubiak won't be able to find an answer or get to an answer at any point against any team when we're in these situations going forward, because of the fact he has such a plethora of knowledge around him, you know, his dad being one of them for sure, as a guy that he can eventually lean on. But just watching some of the stuff that they did last night, the way they were able to make things look so similar yet just different enough that it throws a defense off. What did you make of Clint Kubiak's second night calling plays in Seattle?
It's night and day, and we've used that term a few times, but it's 180 degrees from Ryan Grubb in many ways. One, how much under center stuff they're doing. And when you think about the preseason game with the Browns last year and Geno's touchdown drive, with the only time we saw the first team starters there, it was shotgun, 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 shotgun. I think under center, shotgun. I don't think they ran the ball one time. And little did we know that was pretty much what we would see throughout the season. So with this offense, we're seeing them mix it up. When they're in shotgun, they tend to be in 11 personnel, but sometimes it will have 12 personnel and shotgun out there and have like Brady Russell when Milroe was in the game. His slant play, that was a 2 tight end set, but Russell was just in the slot and he was able to run the slant and the turf monster got him. Otherwise, he might have had a touchdown. But in terms of like the first 2 quarterbacks, so I'd say I'm focusing more on Darnold and Locke because they're more experienced and they're going to have that familiarity with NFL offenses, NFL play calling, but also the fact that they've been working with the ones, and Milroe has been stuck with the 3s the whole offseason. So I think you get a better feel for Kubiak's play calling when those 2 are in the game, and it is partially why I suspect that Milroe isn't getting more reps sooner. But be that as it may, you see the run-pass balance, and it's going to be adjustable. They're not going to be like this every single week because it is impossible and impractical and stupid and stubborn to just go, we're going to run the ball relentlessly, because there are going to be some games, guaranteed, it's not going to work well, and then they're going to have to go to plan B. I'm curious to see what Kubiak does and how he performs when he has to go to a plan B, C, and D against better defenses or defenses well prepared to stop this offense. But you can see the motion. You can see the inspiration from whether it's his dad's offenses or the Kyle Shanahan offenses or the Mike Shanahan offenses. You got some old school mixed in with the new school. And the old school, I mean, classic I formation stuff. You got Robbie Utes lined up right at, in a straight, either in an offset I or traditional I formation, and just pounding the rock. But one thing that you mentioned earlier is multiple looks from the same formation. So, or multiple plays from the same look. And this is something that has killed the Seahawks over the years when dealing with the McVay and Shanahan offenses. And it's something that we've wanted to see more consistently, more effective from the Seahawks for years. And I feel like Clint is better equipped to do that than Shane Waldron was, because I know Waldron was part of that McVay staff, but Waldron had no play calling experience up until he was hired by the Seahawks. Now, Kubiak doesn't have some incredibly expansive play calling experience himself in the NFL. This is only going to be his third season, but he's been in the NFL for quite a long time. And that matters a whole lot, in addition to the fact that his dad's Gary Kubiak. So he's been around football for forever at an NFL level. So I thought that Kubiak called a very good game. Now, in preseason, play calling completely different than the regular season, but just seeing the looks that they were giving, the types of run plays, how they were utilizing the tight ends. We remember the Elijah Arroyo play when Darnold was in the game. I think it was one of those that we had talked about, you and I, privately, when we were together in Renton and Seattle. That boot across the formation, the tight end sneaking across the formation on the play action boot, like, yes, that's exactly what I want to see. Now, we're going to see the deep shots later, because don't forget, those first 2 weeks with New Orleans last year, Carr was airing it out to Rashid Shaheed and anybody else. Now, everything fell apart after week 3, but we're going to see those deep shots later on. And I still have question marks about how they're going to attack the intermediate and deep passing games later on in the season. But so far, I'm liking what I see out of the Kubiak offense, and knowing that this is like 10% of the playbook, that there's going to be a lot more to come. And one thing I do want to see is how much they do play action from shotgun. Like, play action from under center is a given, but how are they going to incorporate gun runs and play action from shotgun together? Because if you can have both, I mean, and both are effective, then boy, this offensive ceiling could end up being higher than I thought. Like, I have no visions of this being the best offense of the league or anything close to that, but I would have been fine with like 12 to 15 as their ceiling. But if this O-line can perform like this, and Kubiak shows himself to be a legitimate high-level NFL play caller, might have to bump that ceiling up a few spots.
Yeah, and so we've actually got Brandon Kane from the Hawks Nest in the chat, and he goes, it was a 70-30 run pass split. He book it, and he's not wrong. If you look at the stats last night, 48 rush attempts, 268 yards. They only threw the ball 21 times. Like, as a team, 21, completed 17 at 21 for 209 yards. So that is a flip, a drastic flip from last year. And what we saw with, I would say even last year, we were more like an 80-20 split at some points with Ryan Grubb, and it was pass to run. And you see the difference in how your offense operates, how your O-line can operate. And I don't know, watching Clint Kubiak and what he was able to do, and the thing that was interesting, Jake Bobo mentioned it in his press conference, and it's a really key point. And he states that the receivers take off and run 10 yards, and it looks the exact same across the board, whether it's a run play or a play action play. And he says it makes it hard for a DB to know what we're doing. Are we doing a play action? Are we running the ball? And he goes, everything works off everything else. And hearing that from one of your receivers, and I don't know what the follow-up question was. I don't know if it was something along the lines of like, hey, was this different than last year or whatever it was? But listening to Bobo describe what he's in now with this offense and how excited these guys are to be in it, you can see where it's going to cause problems for defenses. Like, you look at even Robbie Outz's catch in the flat. It looked like a run play. He looks like he's going to come across and do the kick out block across and basically run a split zone. And Darnold pulls it, and Outs just backs out, and no one picks him up because the defense has to stay inside and defend the run. And same thing when it came to Bobo's fade. You can't, against the Seahawks in the past, teams been able to play a too high shell in the end zone more frequently because they didn't need to commit anybody to the box because they weren't going to run the ball, or they weren't effective running the ball. So why do we have to bring a safety down here to help out, or squeeze our nickel in? No, we can stay in our too high shell, and we'll be able to take away those end zone fades or those fade balls. Now you see the effect of running the ball, being in those situations, and getting those one-on-one matchups outside more frequently. It's really interesting to just see how it all kind of works together. And, it's going to be interesting to see how this carries on throughout the rest of the year. What does it look like week 1 versus San Francisco? When it's starters all the time, when you're playing against a, Nick Bosa and Fred Warner and Robert Saleh calling defensive plays. But I have much more confidence in it now, seeing it 2 weeks in a row. and not have it be drastically different 2 weeks in a row. Not be like, oh, it's really successful as the Raiders, and we take a massive step back versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Seeing it actually progressively get better, even with our backups in there and them running it, is a definite positive for us to take, I think, going into the season.
Yeah, there's one thing I want to mention before we move on, and it's one play from Kubiak that was a little teaser as to what we can and should see in the regular season. And you could finish my sentence. Yeah, you could finish my sentence for me, but 3rd and 1 after the Barner play. I think it was after the Barner play. And then you end up with Jalen Milroe in the game with Zach Charbonnet, and I think Utz was in there. And then Darnold is in the backfield as well. And then you push Jalen Milroe for a first down. And look, it's not like Darnold is immobile or can't run a sneak, but that's the type of play that, one, Packers are a bunch of whiny babies for wanting the push band. And the second bit is that that's a way to improve your 3rd down efficiency. If you have somebody like Jalen Milroe, he can be a QB power option on 3rd and short. He can be a guy who's doing a read option keeper, or it could even be like, one of these days, it'll be an RPO look on 3rd down and 1, and he's going to keep it and he's going to throw it to an open guy because they're going to be so committed to trying to stop him. I think about that Russ touchdown to Ricardo Lockett against Green Bay in week 1 of 2014, like that kind of play. So that's a little hint, a little teaser as far as what Jalen Milroe can do. And the 3rd down efficiency has been tremendous for Seattle through these 2 weeks. Unsustainably so, obviously. It is preseason, but the fact that they're not in 3rd and 15, 3rd and 18, that they're not going behind the sticks. If you have an effective running game, they can get 3-4 yards at a time. It is way different than facing as many 3rd and longs as the Seahawks have faced, where you are in no choice but to go into an obvious passing situation and having to deal with rushers with their ears pinned back and their tails up ready to attack. So better running game should produce more favorable 3rd down spots, or alternatively, avoid 3rd down altogether. Early down success is going to be so key.
Well, and here's the interesting thing, too. When's the last time we've seen that many explosive run plays of 10-plus yards in back-to-back weeks? We had Holani in that in the game 1 versus the Raiders, and you come back and have Holani again. You got Charbonnet, Damien Martinez, Jacardi Wright. Like, you've got all these explosive run plays, and we're used to explosive pass plays. We haven't really seen a lot of explosive run plays. We've had a few with K9 throughout the years, but nothing week in and week out. We can go, yeah, we may pop 2 30-yard runs today. Like, you'd have to go back probably to Rashad Penny when he came in for that final half of that season and had his, all, MVP level 6 games that he played there, or whatever it was, to go back to when we've had explosive running games. And so it's going to be something that's definitely a refreshing thing to see going into the season. But just before, guys, we continue, make sure you guys click that like button, subscribe button, help the show out. There's about 624 of you guys in here. Really appreciate you guys being here and commenting and being a part of the conversation. We love it. And we will get to a viewer Q&A part at the end of the show where we will answer a bunch of the questions you guys have and the comments you guys have put in there. So we really appreciate that. And we appreciate everyone that has helped grow this channel to where it is now. And we are looking forward to it growing more with a lot of the new stuff that we're going to bring you guys come this season. So, Mookie, let's move on to the defensive side. And I think we can call it a dominant defensive performance to a point, because really one of the touchdowns for Kansas City came off a faulty special teams attempt on the punt. And we had that lovely punt return get brought back against us. But that's something we'll talk about, I think, when we get to the looking ahead part, because I'm still worried about the special teams. But with that being said, Mookie, what did you make of this defense? I know Patrick Mahomes wasn't out there and Travis Kelce wasn't out there, but man, this defense, there is a vibe to this defense that wasn't even there. Like, it started to show up, I think, towards the end of last year, but it was an interesting thing to see, Julian Love going and doing what he did on that 4th down run, and in a preseason game doing that, not a regular season game, a preseason game where most guys are like, oh yeah, I'll wait for the regular season. No, you see these guys playing like it's a regular season game.
Yeah, and I saw some comments from national observers about the Seahawks offense primarily, but even the defense, as far as how intense they were on Friday night, even from the first team all the way down to like the Seth Colemans of the world. We could talk about them later. But yeah, the first couple of drives were a little bit shaky. Some coverage mishaps. Like Nick Emanwari had his rookie moment because that might have been his assignment or it was somebody's assignment to go cover Pacheco. And he's still communicating, what are we in? Who should be paying attention to the back? And Minshew just flicks it out and it's a big play. But you mentioned the Julian Love stop. The play before that, Kobe Bryant also submarined that tight end. I think it was Wiley. I think it was Jared Wiley, not Tunyon. Tunyon rather. But that was going to be a first down. And Bryant just darted in and made the key stop. So, yeah, the defense was good. I tell you what, I'm more focused on the second and third team and how they performed because last week I'd say they were substandard in the second half, but they were much better yesterday. Like the first team, not having Lawrence, not having Leonard Williams, I think we'll get a better idea of this defensive line later on when the games count. But the second and third team, looking at the depth, Brandon Peely, once again, making a big play. So after Drew Lock has his 4th down and goal incomplete pass, I said on the field goals account, safety incoming. And like a prophet, it happened. And it's Brandon Peely again, blowing up a run play right away. And you and I have talked about it, and I've written it publicly. I no longer think it's a lock for Hankins to be on this team. Now, he's on PUP right now, and we don't know when he's coming back. But he's on, a $2 million contract. In fact, I could pull it up. 1 year, $2,115,000, of which $1,255,000 is base salary, and then you got a prorated signing bonus, so that's guaranteed, and then you got your per game roster bonus. So if he gets let go, he's off PUP or whatever, and he gets let go, $1.765 million saved. The only thing that results in dead money is the signing bonus because that's guaranteed. And like I said earlier, not this show, but another, and I might have been in Pulse of the Hawks, that I think they signed Hankins so late into the offseason as a hedge because they didn't know about the existing nose tackles on the roster. And Bohanna and Peely, like they've known Bohanna a bit because he was on the practice squad before Peely was. But, McDonald has praised Peely quite a bit, even in the training camp press conferences. And on the field, I think that Peely has been impactful. And he is a big body on a defensive line where there are not a lot of guys who weigh north of 330 like Brandon Peely does. And maybe I'm a little bit biased because he went to high school not too far from where I live here in Portland, but I'd absolutely love to see him make the team. I think it could be a case where they roster both Bohanna and Peely and let Hankins go. Doesn't mean they'll stay on the roster the whole season, but until Riley Mills is healthy again, which might not even be, he might end up being just a total medical redshirt this year. But just to have Bohanna and Peely as defensive line depth, nose tackle depth, whatever, I think that would be preferable to Hankins. Because if you notice last year, during the defensive improvement, Hankins was getting fewer snaps and they were playing Murphy more. So I think that they're going to end up moving on from Hankins and then having Peely at a minimum be on there. But what's his name? Jared Ivey, again, also impressing. Like, I don't know how many UDFAs are going to make this roster. To me, it's going to be 1 or 2 at most. But I think that Ivey is going to be a strong contender to make this roster, especially with Chenna still injured. He can be that big end, and you can move him inside as well. And he should have had a half sack to me. Seth Coleman's sack looked pretty close to a half sack, and then he got a half sack early with between him and Jamie Sherritt. But Jamie did like 90% of the work. Thought the pass rush was better, the coverage was better. They held Kansas City under 100 passing yards. So yeah, the defense was very, very good in the second and third units, and that pleased me greatly, especially Jarek Reed. Like, Jarek Reed's probably not going to make this team, but just to see him make a couple of plays, knowing the injuries he's been dealing with, I think that was really encouraging as far as him.
Yeah, no, I got to agree with you. Bohanna and Peely have played. Yeah, I'm just about to put this up on. This is what you're laughing at?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Slip on a Bohanna Peely.
That is some elite roster wordplay.
Yeah, that is elite roster wordplay. Well done, sir. Well done. The thing for me with Bohanna and Peely, Mookie, we talked about when we were there in Seattle that, again, Hankins was signed so late. I could see Hankins being what Jason Peters was a few years ago, where you get him through to the practice squad. He's one of your veteran practice squad guys. And if you need to elevate him, you do. But if Bohanna and Peely are playing this way, and they're both affecting the interior of that defensive front, and they're playing well enough that they, I think, are going to be able to potentially give, Jaron Reed more blows throughout the year where he can take rests and come in more on the third down and pass rush. If those two can play well enough on first and second down and run situations, and then you have Murphy and Jaron Reed and Leonard Williams and all that come on the field, it's really interesting because I remember there's a press conference, I think it was last week, Mike McDonald was asked about the usage of Byron Murphy and how they were going to do it. And he says it very much depends on if Leo's on the field or Jaron's on the field, where he's going to line up, whether he's going to be a 3-tech, whether he's going to be a 1-tech or a 0-tech or whatever he's going to be. And I found that kind of interesting. So that tells you how they've got different ways that they're going to deploy Byron Murphy this year. You add Bohanna and Peely into this, it's definitely going to, I think, help this defense have a healthier rotation. Jared Ivey being part of that, because again, he flashed again at different points throughout this game. The thing for me that's still a worry in this defense as a whole is the interior linebacker position, because Drake Thomas played well, Patrick O'Connell played well, but there is a significant drop-off when you see those guys, and we don't know what the situation is currently with Tyrese Knight and his health issues. I think there's a good chance Seattle could be in the market to add a veteran at that spot. Josh Rosh still hasn't got on the field yet. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that interior linebacking group. I also found it interesting last night. Did you notice how much longer Ty Okada played at safety than he did the previous Raiders game? He was in there a lot longer, especially with the threes. That was interesting to me because he played back there with Jarek Reed quite a bit. And I don't know if that was a comfortability thing to have a run mate with Reed that knew more about what he was doing and let Reed just play free so Okada could make the calls. But definitely, I think DeAnthony Bell makes this team. Like, he, again, was all around the ball. He had that good pressure at one point with Ivy. What did you make of the cornerbacks outside of Reek and Witherspoon? I got to give credit. Reek looks more locked in this year. Like, he really does. You don't see as many lapses as you've seen, I guess, preseason, but even him flying across the field on that drag route with the tight end early in the game, and he makes it so hard when he's on to throw it around him on a drag route. You try to lead your receiver, but he's just so long, it's almost impossible.
Yeah, the corners, I think they performed better, whether it was Williams or Waxer made a play. I think he had a pass breakup. I mean, Kansas City, their passing offense was, it looked exactly how it would look if you took Patrick Mahomes out of the game. And whether it was Minshew or others, they weren't challenging downfield a whole lot. I suspect that there were just not a lot of people open against the corners. Now, you mentioned the linebacker play, and yes, a couple of the busts, I think, involved the worst reps for Seattle's pass defense involved the linebackers. Nothing against O'Connell or Thomas. I think O'Connell's going to make the team over Ross, and that O'Connell will just assume Ross's special team snaps. But really, it's a 2-linebacker team. Like, the third linebacker is probably Drake Thomas, but I'm not anticipating Drake Thomas to be like a net positive in a regular season game compared to Tyrese Knight. But the drop-off from Jones and Knight to O'Connell and Thomas is pretty stark. So, and it just from a speed and athleticism standpoint, I feel like that's very noticeable on the field. But yeah, the safety position, Okada playing a lot longer than I had anticipated. I know he got dinged for that PI. I thought the ball was uncatchable, but also he ran into the guy. So they're probably going to flag that when it kind of looks obvious. Bell did get beaten for a touchdown when Tunyon kind of threw him out of the club. And I know people were like, push off, blah, blah, blah. They're not going to call OPI on tight ends pushing off on safeties, man. It's just get in the weight room. It's going to be different if it was like tight end and linebacker or something, but I'm not bothered, about that, in the slightest. But yeah, I think they got their 4 safeties pretty clearly defined: Love, Kobe, Imanwari, and Bell over Okada. So I think they'll just stash him on the practice squad again. Anybody else but below Okada, like Jarek Reed, maybe he could be practice squad, or he just, happy trails elsewhere. But yeah, the depth on this defense is not super great at key positions, but at least they showed a lot more than they did against the Raiders, where it felt a little bit too easy. And obviously McDonald knew, because he cut Cam Alexander the next 2 days after getting beaten for that long touchdown. So I'm curious to see how this defense, the 2s and 3s, really play in the Green Bay game. I'm not going to pay attention to what they do in the scrimmage, but in the Green Bay game, in the actual game itself, there's still going to be jobs on the line. And I want to see who's going to take that, take that next step and make that last push. One thing we have to mention is Tyreek Smith didn't play. And he must have picked up a knock for him to not suit up, because like I feel like he didn't play so well and have such a great camp that suddenly he's safe and doesn't have to play preseason. So hopefully that's just a minor thing. But I think that with Nwosu down, Smith and Ivy, at least through week 1, will be at least through the first 4 weeks of the season, because that's how long Chenna would have to be out on PUP. I think they're going to be on this roster.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be interesting to see how this all, especially with the Riley Mills and Chenna both being injured to start the year. It'll be interesting to see how it all kind of shapes up. You could feel Derek Hall a bit more and Boy Mafe in this game, which was nice to see. They both early on had their moments. But Mookie, let's now look ahead. We've got one more preseason game and then basically cut down, and then we're playing the 49ers in a couple of weeks. And so has anything changed in your opinion on this team from when you started, when we were at FanFest and looking into the preseason, to now seeing them perform 2 times in a row? Have any of your expectations or anything changed?
My expectations are the same a few months ago as they are now, which is that I think the Seahawks can win, or at least have a ceiling of 11 wins, maybe even 12 if I want to bump it up just for the sake of poetically using 12. But I think that the floor is a little bit higher. So maybe like if all goes wrong, 6 or 7 wins. And we'll be lamenting another lost season for the Seahawks. But their ceiling, I think, is win the NFC West and win a playoff game. Like Super Bowl run, not counting on it. I don't think this is that kind of team yet. But for the San Francisco game, especially as banged up as the 49ers are, I think that is going to tell us a whole lot about the way the rest of the season will go, maybe for both Seattle and San Francisco, because the one thing that has been consistent over the last few seasons, when the Seahawks have played the 49ers and lost almost all the time, they have not been able to run the ball against the Niners front. Not once. Like, I don't think they've cleared, any of the running backs has cleared 100. They haven't even cleared like 60 during those games. And then we know that the Niners have been able to get 100-yard rushing games from McCaffrey, Jordan Mason, and Isaac Guerrero. So like anybody's been able to run on the Seahawks, but the Seahawks haven't been able to do much anything against the 49ers defense. Now, they've made a lot of changes on the defensive line, on the interior. Hargrave's gone. They've drafted a couple of guys in C.J. West and Alfred Collins. So Robert Saleh is still a fantastic defensive coordinator. And I'm going to have some trepidation knowing it's going to be Saleh coming into week 1. But still, I'm more optimistic about this season than I suspect some of the national pundits. But again, this 49ers game will tell us a whole lot on the offensive side of the ball. Like, if you can bully the 49ers defense, which on paper, even with the guys that they've lost, should still be good, then I might just be a real believer that this is going to be not just a good team, but a very good team. Defensively, I'm not too worried. There are 2 areas that they have to fix. Early down defense was bad, and the play action defense was abysmal. So like those 2 things have got to be fixed. And if they fix them to even something like mediocre, then that raises the ceiling of this defense significantly. So yeah, well, I'm just ready for the season to begin. Like, I'm not going to have strong takeaways for the Green Bay game. It's just nobody get injured. My only curiosity is how much Jalen Milroe plays in the final week. Like, is he going to get the second half all to himself? Is he going to play a majority of the game over Drew Lock and kind of preserve Lock as your QB2? So those are kind of the things I'm looking for in the Green Bay game. But once the regular season hits, all eyes are on this offense and this offensive line. Like, the difficulty is going to ratchet up. How are you going to handle stunts? How are you going to handle twists, the little games that are run up front? How are you going to handle blitzes? How are you going to handle when you're in obvious passing situations and you don't have favorable game scripts? So yeah, I'm just countdown is on, baby. That this looks a little bit more like the Seahawks football that we used to watch and may yet get to watch again to some degree, at least in terms of the defense and the running game.
My look ahead is to your point. I think with Milroe, I'm more confident now in my prognosis that I think he's 2 years away. Just watching him and some of the throws and the fact that he's still learning, he's still coming along. He is getting there, though. The improvement is seen week to week to week with him, but it is enough of a gap between him and Drew Lock that I think Drew Lock is safe being the number 2 quarterback. I know there were a lot of people saying, well, if he continues to play well, does Lock become, a tradable piece? It was something we talked about with Dana O'Gorman on our latest show that we recorded the other day. That's actually up on our website, so everyone check that one out as well. But that was something she brought up, is Drew Lock potentially a trade piece at the end of the preseason if Jalen Milroe continues to go? And my thing is, there's enough of a gap between Drew and Sam, and there is a massive gap between Sam and Jalen, in my opinion. And there's enough of a gap between Jalen and Drew that the quarterbacking and the 3 of them being there makes sense. You can bring Jalen in for the tush push and the other things you can do with him with his athleticism. But if Sam were ever to go down, there's more confidence from me, at least, that Drew Lock can lead this team to a couple of wins if we needed to have it for a week or two, like we did in 2022. Was 2023 when Gino went down for a few games there. The other thing I'll say is, again, same thing to your point, Mookie, nobody get injured. We don't need any injuries right now. And, I'm interested to see some of these bubble guys play, like a Lamea, like, some of these running backs that we are kind of still trying to figure out, okay, who fits in? How are they going to do these numbers? Same with the receiver group, because Derek Young, for me, has made a massive jump to be considered a guy in the receiving group because he gives you special teams value, which we know Mike McDonald wants out of his depth receivers. He mentioned that in an interview, that receivers that aren't the starting 3 really need to be able to play on special teams. We know Derek Young can do that. He's a great gunner, and now he's definitely stepping up as a receiver, it seems, over the last 2 games for sure. So it makes it interesting to see what these numbers and this roster breakdown will be like. Okay, Mookie, so outside of that, let's kind of get into some of these comments. And so this is going to be the segment this year. We're going to call this for viewer Q&A, the 12's takeaways. So guys, we're going to take your comments, your questions and stuff. We'll do this for about 10 to 12 minutes at the end of each show. Gives you guys the opportunity to get any questions you have in from Mookie, myself, Ryan, or any of the other guests that we have on throughout these post-game shows. So let's start here, Mookie. I've got about 25 of them that are starred, so that's quite a few, actually. So let's look at the first one up here. It's I'd rather be flying an X-Wing, who we met down in Seattle when we were at FanFest. He goes, holy crap, it was awesome to see a fully functional offense again. Trying not to get too hyped, but we have a run game.
Yeah, I think that they've got a run game. At least they can be average. Not a below average run game. They should be at least an average run game. And to think, Kenneth Walker hasn't had a snap in preseason, and he won't. But I can't wait to see what he does in the regular season. And good call to call the 12's takeaway so that Texas A&M doesn't come knocking at your door.
Exactly. That was exactly my thought process in that, Mookie. Dogzilla Monster, he's always in here. He's in a bunch of the shows that, with Dan Viens and such. He goes, I was stunned at some of the running lanes the O-line opened. Yeah, I was honestly too. I was kind of flabbergasted, especially Zach Charbonnet's touchdown run there when we were in that 13 personnel look, and they run the jet, and all of a sudden you see Charbonnet hit it, and there is not a soul around him, and he just basically sprints into an open end zone, and there's no one to touch him there. It was kind of flabbergasting.
Yeah, and Eric Saubert also, where they had a key block on that touchdown. So
yes,
we're seeing his value as a blocking tight end, and he's not going to be getting targets, but I think they've upgraded from Pharaoh Brown.
I agreed. Amy Holmes comes in, says, felt like a season game in the stands. Yeah, I think there was some post put out that there was like 68,000 there. It was loud. Like I'm going to be very interested to see what that Niners game's like week 1, because the Niners fan group does travel well. But I feel like this team has gotten more of the city back around it. Not that they had lost it, but in the stands, I mean, and that the people are coming back. Seahawks fans are coming back. They're going to be loud. They're going to be present at this game because this team is giving them something to really cheer for again in this new direction.
Yeah, I expect there to be tons of 49. We know how many California transplants live up in the Pacific Northwest. One, I'm one of them. And two, like a lot of 49ers fans in the Portland area and the Seattle area. It's not the other side of the world. So they're going to be a lot of 49ers fans, but make them sad on the way out. Like it's going to be that kind of like mix, but don't let it be like that Raiders game today, or it might as well have been a 49ers home game in Vegas.
Yeah. Jason comes in here. He says, I feel like Sundell is going to be our center. That's how I feel, Jason. It's how I felt, honestly, for the majority of it. Last year, I was really high on Sundell coming out of camp. I think he's probably going to win this job, especially if Olu can't come back and play, because I feel like Olu would get a majority of the reps in that Green Bay game if he's healthy enough.
Well, I'm trying to think if there ever comes a time where it's the Milroe package and Sundell is in the lineup as a starting center, we could get a Jalen to Jalen exchange. It's like Gumble to Gumble and Family Guy.
This is very true. All right, let's go to our next one here. We got Cap comes in. He goes, what I noticed is that I felt sort of bored. Then I realized that I have years of backed up stress that so far is not present.
Yeah, when I get to write the headline and intro paragraph well in advance, as opposed to, all right, this game is hanging in the balance. I can't write the final score post and this easily. I'm feeling great. So as I said on Pulse earlier this week, like I want to see the Seahawks. We got a beat down yesterday in a game that doesn't count for anything. But when the games do count, I want to see some beat downs against inferior teams, against the worst teams in the league that they're expected to play, such that we're seeing Locke or Milroe in the game in the fourth quarter, and Sam and everybody else have got caps on and they can chill. Like we have seen too few of those games the last several years, including at the end of the Pete and Russell years.
Misfit 74 comes in with no clock management issues either. Raiders have some play clock running out, timeout stuff with Geno today. Yeah, that's one thing that, we haven't really seen with this group. There was the one delay of game penalty I think they took trying to draw the Chiefs offside, and then we ended up punting the ball anyway, which I don't really count. But there's never been a point where the offenses look panicked, like, oh gosh, we got to get the snap off. Like everything is functioning the way it should be. They're in and out of the huddle quick. And I think this goes to just the style this offense is, which is we see the same with the Rams, we see the same with the Vikings, and we see the same with the 49ers, is because your center has a role calling out fronts and stuff, and it's not just all on your quarterback, and your quarterback's really looking at the second layer of that defense, and that's basically about it. I think it allows this offense to run a lot more effectively because it's not all on the quarterback's shoulders to make all the checks and reads. Part of that is now divvied up to your center.
Yeah, and the clock management stuff with Vegas, that's just a Pete Carroll rite of passage. So the Raiders fans get used to that. But the clock management issues, I'll wait till they have an actual road game and in a raucous atmosphere before I make any grand declarations. But hopefully the procedural stuff is drastically reduced from some of what we saw with Grubb last season. And as you mentioned, not everything is on the quarterback's shoulders like it seemingly was with Geno. Like it's on the center, it's on the quarterback, making sure that everybody is in sync with one another is so pivotal. And that's something that has been a staple of some of the more free-flowing and smoother Kubiak or Shanahan-inspired offenses over the years.
And we got Ian Victor in here, who's basically our chat kind of police. He looks after things, makes sure that things are staying on track. So Ian, always appreciate you doing that. He goes, have you all noticed that most teams are using the tush push after most teams were crying about the play? Well, Mookie, to your point earlier about Green Bay, like I think everyone's going to adopt it. It's not, I know that Green Bay saying it's a dangerous play. I think it's Green Bay just being sore losers that they can't stop it. I haven't seen a drastic, massive injury come out of it yet where we're talking like, okay, we really got to consider this because look at all these strings of injuries that have occurred from the tush push play being instituted into the NFL.
Yeah, and anybody here who watches the CFL, and I know you got a 1 yard neutral zone, but it is very, very common to have a backup quarterback in the game, get the sneak on third. It's almost impossible to fail on 3rd and 1 or 2nd and 1 in the CFL. So I think we're going to see a lot of that borrowed for the NFL where, bring the backup in and let them run a sneak. I'm surprised Kansas City doesn't do it more often, but I guess they have Kelsey. So whether it's a quarterback or a tight end, like I don't care if you think it's ugly, it works.
So we've got Dogzilla back in. He goes, the tight ends who run block best will likely get the most snaps. And I think that's something that's going to be interesting to see is the usage of Arroyo, because we were talking about it off air before we came on here. Arroyo runs so smooth and so efficiently, even compared to Noah Fant, it's like effortless for him. And I've made the comparison that as a player and the way he moves is similar to what Aaron Hernandez was for the Florida Gators and for the New England Patriots in a matchup nightmare because of how smooth he moves. Not all the extracurricular stuff, obviously, that's going on. I will make that very clear. I'm not talking about that. But as a player on the field, Aaron Hernandez was a nightmare matchup as a tight end because he could do things that most tight ends couldn't do with the way he moved. Arroyo is very similar in that skill set. You watched him on that why drag a cross play that they ran off the boot. He gets open, then he can turn the corner and get another 5, 6, 7 yards and become a very viable threat running with the ball in his hands. I will say, though, Eric Saubert has definitely proven his value, I think, through this preseason and why he's here in his blocking and his ability to seal off edges. And AJ Barner is gotten better as a blocker. Like he actually has. I've watched him through the All-22. He is a much better blocker this year than he was last year.
Yeah, and we're talking really 3 tight ends because Brady Russell is going to get almost all of his snaps, I think, either as a special teamer or as like a, fourth string tight end, maybe a garbage time tight end or fullback. So, yeah, I think that we're still going to see predominantly Barner and Arroyo, but when we get into obvious running situations, we're going to see either Barner as Arroyo subbed out, or we're going to see all 3 on the field. But yeah, it's good to have like a more traditional tight end room. You got your receiving tight end in Arroyo, you've got your 2-way tight end, and you got your blocking tight end.
All right. We got Rocky in the chat. Great to see you, Rocky. I'm in this fantasy league for football, and we've got our draft tomorrow, so I'm really looking forward to that. And I got to thank Dan Viens for getting me into this fantasy football league, so appreciate you being in the chat, Rocky. We've got this one from Rocky. He goes, love this style. It reminds me of the glory days, good running game, and great defense. Yeah, no, honestly, if you have the defense that we're expecting to have with Mike McDonald this year, and you add a running game to it where they can control the clock and control the terms or dictate the terms, as Mike McDonald likes to say, this team could be very challenging to play, especially at home when the weather gets bad, like it was actually ironically in August with the rain. Can make it very tough to play in Seattle when they're pounding the ball down your throat, and then you have to go and, because the clock's against you and they're scoring and you got to start taking shot plays. We know what this defense can do when they can pin their ears back and just go after you.
It's a style of football that Pete Carroll would appreciate, but ultimately failed to replicate after the Legion of Boom left. Like we talked about, okay, get a good running game, run the football, and build your defense up. And they Carroll and Schneider really were unable to do that during those last few years together. And of course, there was the internal conflicts between him and Wilson and whether they wanted to be a pass first offense and this and that. But good running game, great defense, efficient passing game. Don't want to see Darnold throw it 700 times, but if you're playing with leads and you got a running game that's very good and you got a defense that's forcing stops, getting turnovers and all that, you don't need to throw it 700 times. You could end up, with bottom 10 attempts in the league.
I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. Comes back in. He goes, 1, everyone's saying extend Lucas is completely right. 2, anyone you have your eyes on that you would want the Hawks to sign on the cut to 53? I haven't seen anyone yet in the 2 teams that we've played that's really popped out to me that I go, yeah, we need to get him on our team. And certainly I'm not taking Skyy Moore, even though he took a punt back because he can barely catch the ball, it seems, consistently. And Mookie and you and me talked about that in our chat. I'll be doing more of a deep dive on other teams throughout the week leading up to obviously the Green Bay game and the week after, seeing, are there guys that really kind of stood out that I think the Seahawks could take and add. Overall, though, I agree. I think I think Lucas and Cross could be the first 2 guys since we've seen in a long time that get in-season extensions like KJ Wright got at a point and other guys got throughout the years where November rolls around and John starts doling out the extensions going into the next year. So, Mookie, what are your thoughts on the 2-part question here?
Let's let Lucas get a few games in unscathed, and then we'll go extension time. And I don't think he's going to be as expensive as Cross will be because he has missed so much time that he's not going to be commanding top levels money. And then I'm guessing I'd rather be flying an X-Wing is talking about like other players on other teams. And I haven't been watching so much preseason of other teams that I have any opinion of certain players, except, and it's a running back, so there's no need for Seattle to do this, but I was surprised Donovan Edwards went undrafted. And I saw him in the Jets-Packers game, and he looked really good. And I would absolutely have loved to have had Edwards on the Seahawks, but no need. So we'll see how the cut downs go for everybody next week. And then I'll be going, yeah, I want this player, that player, try and claim somebody off waivers. But my immediate thought is look at the inside linebacker position.
Agreed. Rocky comes back in here with, what are we going to do with Reek? Again, I think Reek fits that same kind of thing. I got a feeling they're going to see Reek play this whole year and see if he can be consistent. They're going to have to play Witherspoon potentially next year, or going in throughout next year. They'll have to pay him because he'll be in a contract year. Or they may fifth year option Witherspoon. Who knows? But with Reek, I think they're going to let this whole season play out before they make a decision on Reek Woolen, just because of his up and downs he's had. I will say, though, and I said it earlier in the show, Reek looks more focused, and even listening to him talk, he seems more focused this year.
Just don't get benched again for a series, and don't have issues with tackling and effort. And I think Reek will get extended because his ups are way more than the downs. It's just that his downs tend to be glaringly bad. There might be a discussion to have about whether you're going to pay both Reek and Spoon, but shoot, I would. They don't have a comfortable enough cornerback room to trust and just replace in the draft all the time. So, yeah, Reek is going to be someone I think they look at it possibly extending at the end of the season. It's not going to be a mid-season one.
So we've got Slarty comes in here and he goes, trick play, fake tush push. Milroe gets the snap, hikes it back to Sam with a tight end leaking out. You never know. Clint Kubiak might be that creative at some point where we see some trick play with both Sam and Jalen on the field, and somehow we think it's going to be one thing and it ends up being a completely different thing.
Well, just let it be a quarterback or Torrey Horton. Because don't forget, Torrey Horton's like
a good thrower, but he's got a good
touchdown
percentage.
Yeah, it's like he's a trick play option too as a passer, but just no DJ Dallas redux. But yeah, they could do some fun things with fake tush push. The Eagles have done it. So yeah, let's see if they do any trick plays, and hopefully they work.
Dogzilla comes in here with, I vote to keep Myers on special teams.
Was there some sort of like consideration that he wins? They weren't going to pick up a kicker.
I think it's the fact that Myers made the tackle on special teams last night on the blown kickoff coverage. Yeah. And when the guy went up the middle of the field, Myers made the one tackle. Amy comes in and says, Jay seems to be trading on his name. I think Jay Harbaugh is going to be under a lot of scrutiny this year if this special teams unit doesn't turn around. And so far in the preseason, it hasn't looked great. You got holes in the kickoff coverage. You got holes, obviously, in the punt coverage. And the return game has, like, Holani's made a couple of things. Like, we've seen a couple bursts, but nothing consistently. It's going to be a big year for Jay Harbaugh, I think, if he's going to stick. Because we know with Mike McDonald, I get that there's a connection there. But if it doesn't perform well this year, I think we've seen from Mike that he will move on and get someone in that's going to perform.
Yeah, the kick coverage stuff. I have no issues with Dixon. Michael Dixon. Hopefully odd year Jason Myers doesn't show up. Great tackle in the open field. But the coverage units got to be better. And then the return game, I trust to be better because they shouldn't have fumble merchants out there. But yeah, coverage units have not been great the first 2 weeks. And I'll tell you what, with this new kickoff rule, if your coverage units are so bad that a touchback is better, then you've got issues. So I think that the kickoff coverage especially, has got to improve because touchbacks at the 35 this year now. So I think they got to keep forcing that and being more responsible with their gap integrity.
Space comes in. He goes, KC had 104 yards rushing last night. Actually, KC had 17 attempts for 68 yards rushing on the ground. So I don't know where the 104 is coming from, where that number is, but they didn't break 100 yards last night on the ground.
They had 178 yards. And then
total offense.
They barely had 150. So if they had 100 and something, that's news to me. Seattle had 104 yards rushing in the opening quarter. Maybe that's what you're thinking about.
Yeah, maybe. Space then comes back. He goes 11-6 should get us a wild card at minimum. Agreed, it should. I don't want to leave it up to chance. Just win the division. Win the division and you're in. And that's what this team should be gunning for this year. I think they have the talent to actually do it, especially with obviously the Matthew Stafford lingering back saga that's going on down there. And even the 49ers have their fair share of injuries. It sounds like I think Pooney's out potentially the first couple games of the year now too as well. So it's going to be interesting to see what 49ers team shows up in a few weeks here when we get set to play them week 1. And this one's back from Ian. He goes, are we still in the market for an edge rusher, or do we have a player or two that has emerged? Well, I wouldn't say as a pure pass rushing edge we've had anybody really emerge outside of the guys that we already have on the roster and we knew of. Derek Hall, Boy Mafe, DeMarcus Lawrence. I would say Jared Ivey has emerged as a guy in this group now to be a kind of pass rushing, run stopping specialist. Mookie, is anyone else kind of pop for you? I know Connor O'Toole had the sack and the pressures in that first game. Didn't really see much of him in game 2 here. Anyone else standing out to you at all?
Seth Coleman looked good, but again, when we're talking deep in the fourth quarter, like to me, guys who are performing well in the fourth quarter preseason games normally are playing in the first and second quarter, or they're getting reps with the twos or something, and they're really not. So, Ivy's look good. O'Toole has actually looked good. I think O'Toole and Coleman are probably practice squad candidates. If it's a market for an edge rusher, I don't see anybody out there right now. Is Zadarius Smith still unsigned? Like if they want a veteran option, or they have, Jadeveon Clowney, of course, is less of a traditional edge rusher, more like a run stopper at this stage of his career. So I'm not worried until it's time to worry on that front.
We got one in here from Small World. Goes, do you guys think the way this team is playing that season ticket holders will protect home field advantage this year? I said it earlier, Amy brought up how it sounded like a regular season game in there. I think there is a case to be made that, there will be more of a home field advantage presence this year if this team can get out to a hot start and if they can play with leads in games more frequently.
Yeah, do things that get the crowd excited. Get more turnovers and stop turning the ball over. Play with leads, have more explosive plays, get sacks, the stuff that will have the fans chanting Seahawks over and over again. The home field advantage better be better, because you can't rely on going 7-1 or 8-1 on the road all the time, because it's really hard to win on the road. But it can't be 3-6 bad at home this time around. Like when you're playing the AFC South and NFC South, two divisions that we expect to be on the lower end, you got to be able to get those W's. So home field advantage, I want to see it better, but it's not a guarantee. If they beat San Francisco, though, for the first time at home since 2021, I mean, that's going to skyrocket the hype for this team.
Want to give a shout out here to Pork. He gifted 5 HawksZone Rundown podcast memberships. Thank you for that, Pork. And guys, if you want to be able to get these memberships, make sure you have that feature turned on in your YouTube. It'll allow you to get these things. Really appreciate that. And guys, sign up for our membership program. It leads me perfectly into that. There's going to be a lot of cool shows that are going to come out this year in that membership program that you guys are going to want to be able to take a part of and see. And there'll be members only shows. So if you're not a member, you won't be able to see it, unfortunately. With that being said, though, Mookie, I think we do have a slight announcement that we can kind of share with everybody, the 700 plus that are in the show right now. And that is, once I get this banner to come down here, is going to be our show that we're doing once a month now with Brandon Kane. And I'll get rid of that. So we got Brandon Kane, we got Mookie Alexander. Obviously, Mookie, you're going to be joining us, Dan Viens, and myself. And we are going to be doing a show called the Seahawks Syndicate. Once a month, the last Wednesday of every month, we're going to be doing a live show that will rotate through all the channels. And we will be breaking down basically all kind of the 4 quarters of the season for the Hawks. It'll be a live show, so you guys are going to want to tune in and check that in with all those great other Seahawk content creators like Brandon and Dan. Mookie and myself will be there. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's something that kind of came to us after doing our live shows down in Seattle, right, Mookie?
Yeah, it went so well, and appreciate some of you in the chat we actually got to meet, and then others that we may or may not be in the chat that we met either at Lumen Field or at VMAX. So that was so cool. The reception for our live podcast, and then also adding Corbin as a guest, that was so universally positive in a way that is almost impossible to be universally positive on the internet or on YouTube, that we decided, let's do this more regularly. These are not going to be on-site shows. In other words, we're not all going to travel, because none of us, only Dan has any property in Washington. Everyone else lives outside of it. So, but even for us just doing live podcasts from the comfort of our own homes, we're going to be doing that regularly. I think our first show, we're aiming to do one for after cut down day. So so you're going to get our thoughts as far as the roster cuts, any waiver claims the Seahawks make. So again, this is going to be really cool. And hopefully we do have down the line, not saying it's not a guarantee, have some in-person live stuff in Seattle again, because we had a blast. We had a great dinner at the waterfront. We had made great conversation, and we met a lot of you, a lot of a lot of very cool folks. A lot of cold folks means that those are the ones who don't watch this, but a lot of cool folks who got to have a little chit chat with us throughout the weekend.
Yeah, no, and it's something that I think we're going to do yearly going forward. I think that was the discussion, is every year we will do a live show in Seattle preseason home game 1 that Seattle gets, or whatever their first home preseason game is. The 4 of us are going to try and get back together every year and do a live show, and we might change locations. We don't know, but we definitely love to have more of you guys come out to the show, be a part of it, sit, chat with us. It was a lot of fun. We had Amy there. We had Flying an X-Wing there as well. It was great to see you guys there. And going forward, guys, make sure you guys are all subscribed to everything, whether it's on Field Goals, whether it's here on the HawksZone Rundown. That way you guys won't miss an episode, miss a live show. We're going to be doing our live post-game shows following every Seahawks game going forward into the season. So make sure you guys have that set up so you guys can be a part of that. There will also be probably daily content coming out, or pretty close to daily content coming out from the show. Our next show that'll be coming out, I will be doing a show with Jeff Simmons. We're finally getting our fellow Canadian Seahawk fan and content creator on the show. Something that I've been looking forward to for a very long time since doing this, because I've watched Jeff for years and he's been a big inspiration for me. So we'll be doing a show with Jeff Simmons coming up. So that'll drop later this week, as well as I will be over on the Hawk Nest with Brandon Kane at some point this week, talking about the quarterbacks and quarterback mechanics with Brandon Kane of the Hawks Nest. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then we'll do our Green Bay Packer preview show at some point throughout the week here, get you guys ready for that game coming up. And then, yeah, Mookie, I think next week will be the first Syndicate show, which will be a lot of fun. So make sure, guys, join the membership. Go check out HawksZoneRundown.com. That's where you can get all the merchandise, hats, T-shirts, whatever from the show that you want. And again, help us out, like the show, share the show with fellow Seahawk fans. It means a lot to us, and it's been a great ride so far getting all of you to come and be a part of the show. So, Mookie, for you, anything final thought-wise that you've got going on over at Field Goals?
Well, I just want to shout out a couple of Field Goals comments. Just Hamster G, who's a staple of Field Goals at this point, saying, I appreciate the collaborations to bring great coverage and analysis for the Seahawks. This is in our comment section. This feels like a Super Bowl year for the Seahawks. Glad I said it. Heavy Weather replying, I'm right there with you, baby. So I'm not quite there yet, but I hope you guys are right. And then I'm happy to be wrong. We've got something from Tyler Olson on Sunday as far as just the cohesion of the Seahawks offense and why that's one of the great things about this preseason thus far. Alessandro will have his usual film breakdowns, all 22 stuff throughout the week. I'll come up with some things that'll just be noodling in my head in terms of observations from this Chiefs game. But yeah, back in the swing of things with football season, and looking forward to the Packers game, the 7 o'clock kickoff again. So
here, thanks everyone for coming and joining us on tonight's recap show. But Mookie, Green Bay Packers are up next, and let's get out of here. And we always do it with a Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.